All right, so here we are. I want to talk about something that I haven't really talked about to this point. All right, over the summer, I got my diagnosis of Hashimoto's, which I've been sick for a really long time. It's been a journey. Um, and with that Hashimoto's diagnosis, first I went keto. Um, for like this was back in July. So like for the month of July, I was keto. I was also I had read Fast Like a Girl. I've been into intermittent fasting for a really long time, doing intermittent fasting and longer fasts to varying degrees of success, to varying degrees of consistency, right? And then Hashimoto's, boom, bada bing. And now I've got to really pay attention to what I'm putting in my mouth, right? Full disclosure, I've always been super into whole food eating, Weston Price, um, the nourishing traditions, all of that stuff. I used to blog about that. I used to be a food blogger talking about, fermentation and how to make sourdough and all that stuff. Um, but in the last decade or so, since moving to San Antonio, since the dissolution of my first marriage, I got away from my preferred way of eating, which is whole foods, straight from the farm to table kind of eating. Um, Even during that, though, I was struggling with my health. It was not good times. I was having all kinds of pain and chronic pain, chronic this, that, and the other. Um, so my health has been crashing since in the last couple of years, especially when I got away from that, got away from the raw milk, and starting to eat things like McDonald's, which I didn't do before, and just really doing a lot of things that I knew were not great for my health. Um, so I go keto in July, right? And I immediately start seeing improvements. I start having all kinds of, the weight starts dropping off, the inflammation starts dropping off, um, and then I start because now I'm looking at different videos. Carnivore starts coming in to the algorithm. And and I'd always been like, any kind of extreme eating, whether it's vegan or carnivore, or all this to the exclusion of all that. I'd always thought, that's not that doesn't sit right with me. But the more I started watching these carnivore videos, more out of curiosity, the more I was like, wait, some of this stuff is really starting to make sense. Especially from what I knew from having uh, been really into Price Pottinger and understanding, the phytonutrients and how you have to soak your grains in order to even unlock the nutrition that's in the grains, because the grains don't want to give you their nutrition, stuff like that. And I'm like, well, wait, okay, so plants really don't want us to eat them. The more I look at it, so there's the way of eating, right? But then there's also my spiritual path, which I am as woo as they come. Um, I was raised in evangelical fundamental circles, um, and today I still consider myself a follower of Yeshua, but I am, definitely not. Other Christians would say I'm not a Christian, but you know, whatever. I don't really care about all of that. But I definitely I know my own spiritual giftings, channeling and mediumship and all of that kind of stuff that I blocked from myself for years because I believed the people around me who said that that was evil. So that's not something that you know, be that as it may. I'm no longer there. I am at peace with who I am and my spirituality. Now, here's the thing that I was coming up against in the messaging today. Feels very much, you can't be spiritual unless you're vegetarian or vegan. You have to be vegan if you're going to be, super spiritual. It's the only way to connect with spirit, which also never really, that kind of never sat right with me either, because I'm like, well, really, now that I have gone carnivore and have been eating this way since August, and I feel I've always felt better when I eat more meat, right? I've always felt better when I am more animal based. I've always recognized this. Now that I've cut out all plants, well, not all plants, I still drink coffee. Now that I've cut out most plants in my diet, I feel the difference in my body. And the thing that I have been wrestling with is the perception, and it's a perception. This is like, this is just a perception that you can't be spiritual and eat meat. And yet, let's look at the reality of human life on our planet, and let's look at indigenous peoples the world over, who, for the most part, have been animal based. There's very few indigenous groups that have ever been successfully plant-based, and yet they are so super spiritual, right? They are connected to the lifeblood, literally connected to the lifeblood of this planet, right? And then we look at the introduction of agriculture, and tens of thousands of years ago, we started cultivating plants so that we could eat them. And we needed to because people were starting to congregate in larger groups, and you can't, it was very hard at that time because we weren't domesticating animals at the scale that we needed to in order to feed everybody. It was much easier to cultivate plants so that to make them edible, we had to make the plants edible for ourselves, right? By cultivating them, because they weren't edible. The plants were not readily edible to us, and there was a lot of nutrition that we could not capture from plants that we could more easily capture from animals. So people are congregating in large groups. Now we need to feed more people at a larger scale, so we start cultivating agriculture, right? At the same time, we start to see a shift in like the spirituality. People who are congregating and cultivating agriculture are also changing how they view spirit, how they view the gods, so to speak, So we kind of see this path going where how we feed ourselves is intrinsically linked to how we interact with spirit, right? Now I'm just spitting thoughts right now. I don't have answers to this. I haven't found, and I'm sure probably there are, people discussing these things online. I have not found those circles yet, so I don't know, I don't know who's saying what about any of these things. And I am totally open to, if anyone knows who's talking about carnivore and spirit, the intersectionality of carnivore and spirit, I'd love to start dialoguing with those folks, because this is the perception that you can't be spiritual without cutting out all meat. That's clearly false. That's a false narrative. And right now in Western society, we live in a culture, in the United States specifically, where in order to be spiritual, you have to, you cannot kill. And yet vegans have seem to have also missed the boat on the fact that in order to grow all that soy that they're eating, they are killing way more animals and disrupting way more life than, if I'm having a steak. And so there are all these competing narratives, all of this like kind of false dichotomies, and I want to be involved in the discussion that says where we are now, like, and where am I at right now? Where am I at right now? I'm waiting for open contact. I believe that we are on the brink of becoming galactic as opposed to just simply global. I believe that we are, I know that I personally channel spirit. I know that we are part of a much larger cosmology, and we humans here on planet Earth were plunked here in a particular makeup, eating a particular diet, right? And that can change at any time. We can change it. We can make the choice to change it. We can choose to no longer be animal-based and to go to plant-based. But right now, our physiology seems to be, on a grand scale, seems to be rejecting that a little bit. I mean, if you look at all of the health issues, gluten intolerance, and diseases like Hashimoto's and celiac, and all of the autoimmune diseases that seem to be linked and tied directly to our diet, we're fumbling here. We're fumbling in the dark, and I really want to see us as the collective start to really wrap our heads around how we're doing the human thing. What does it mean to be human, and where do we fit not only on this planet but in the cosmology, in the greater galactic sense? And listening to folks like Bashar and Abraham Hicks and things like that, and in my own dialogue with spirit, there is an overwhelming sense that you can't get it wrong. It's, whatever you choose is okay. Just choose that. Make sure that what you choose, you're choosing from the integrity within yourself, and not because you think you have to, or this is what you should do, but because this is what it comes from the outpouring and the overflowing from within. So I don't have any definitive answers or conclusions right now. Right now, I am in the space of asking the questions and seeking those who are also asking these questions. And where will these questions lead us? What, in the next couple of years, in our current now, when we are faced with all of the turmoil and upheaval and wackiness that's going on, in our country and around the globe, how do we fit into that? Do we want to fit into that? What society do we want to fit into? What do we need to be in order to fit into the society and culture that is most meaningful to us? How are we? Where are we in the splitting prism? And where does diet and spirituality, that intersection, where do we fit in that? If what we have been doing, even if we believed very strongly in it, is not working for us, are we willing to make the shift and change into something that does work, even if it does not, even if it goes against what we formerly believed? That's a tough question. how do we reconcile what formerly seemed evil, you know, because being raised evangelical, you know, channeling was evil, and now here it's something that is important to me and is part of my expression. How do we navigate these changing thoughts and perceptions, and how do we allow ourselves to be teachable, to be malleable, and to really give ourselves the opportunity to make a new choice, to make a new way in the world that we maybe didn't make before. So that's all I really, you know, that's just what I wanted to kind of riff on this morning. I like I said, I don't have any conclusions. I just have lots of questions, and I want to find people who are willing to ask these same questions and dialogue about these things in an open and loving and free manner. So if you're one of those people, you know, drop me a line, hop in the comments, say something about it, and let's chat. Let's talk about these things. It's so important. So thank you so much for joining me on this live. I have no idea how to turn it off. I don't know how to make this stop, but I'm sure that there's a way. So I will figure this out, and thanks for joining in. All right.